Imagine for a moment that everything holding you back isn't real. Not the doubts that paralyze you, nor the fears that whisper in the dark, and not even the invisible chains you've been dragging from the past. All of it is an illusion, because within you lies a vast, ancient and free power, a divine spark that was not born to fear but to shine. This text is a journey toward that spark. Inspired by the timeless wisdom of Emmet Fox, the free soul is not just a title, it's a promise. A practical and spiritual guide for those who are ready, truly ready, to stop surviving and start living. Here you won't find empty formulas or fleeting promises. You'll find eternal principles, capable of dissolving fear, awakening your awareness and unlocking the doors to the inner kingdom. So take a deep breath, free your mind, and take the first step toward a fearless life, toward an existence where your soul can finally be what it was always meant to be, free. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God who strengthens you. Isaiah 41:10. Living without fear is not a fantasy, nor a utopia reserved for saints, nor an unreachable aspiration at the end of a long, burdensome life. Living without fear is, simply put, the natural state of the soul that has remembered who it is. It is the spontaneous result of a consciousness that has awakened to the truth. It is the condition of one who no longer believes in the power of evil, in the tyranny of circumstances, in the authority of men, or in the punishment of a God invented by human ignorance. You did not come into this world to live in constant alertness, to fear what might happen, to suffer for what has already passed, or to run from who you are. You came with a divine mission to manifest the image and likeness of God in a visible form. And the image of God does not tremble, the likeness of God does not flee. The one who dwells in God, as St. John said, does not fear. In love there is no fear. Perfect love casts out all fear. 1 John 4:18. Because fear is incompatible with the presence of God in the heart. Where there is fear, spiritual understanding is lacking. Where there is fear, the soul has been overtaken by the lower mind. Where there is fear, true love has not yet been known. That is why this book was not born to help you manage fear. I will not offer you strategies to cope with it, nor teach you to repress it, nor convince you that it's natural, and that you must accept it as a part of yourself. None of that. This book has been dictated by the Spirit so that you may remember that fear is not your teacher. You were not born with fear. You are not fear, and you do not need to keep obeying it. You were taught from a young age that fear is necessary, that it protects you, that it keeps you safe, that it is a sign of prudence. But that is a mistake. Fear does not protect, it limits. Fear does not care, it confines. Fear does not guide, it confuses. Fear is not instinct, it is programming. An ancient programming repeated for centuries, engraved into your consciousness by generations that forgot their divine origin and adapted to a fallen world, as though it were the only one possible. But that world is not real. It is an illusory construct born from a mind separated from God. Fear, like all that is false, cannot withstand the light. That is why, when you raise your consciousness, when you begin to think like a soul and not like a character, when you speak as an heir of the kingdom and not as a victim of circumstances, when you pray as someone who knows the Father and not as someone begging a tyrant, fear begins to dissolve. Not because you become strong by the world's standards, but because you remember you were never alone. Not because you conquer your fears with strength, but because you replace them with truth. Not because you ignore them, but because you transcend them from a higher level of consciousness. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalm 23:4. That is the prayer of the soul that no longer lives from the body, from the story, or from the temporary self, but from the certainty of its union with love. That is the consciousness this book seeks to guide you to, the consciousness of the free soul. And when you become a free soul, not as a metaphor, but as a living experience, life changes. Your decisions change. Your body responds differently. Your relationships soften. Your words lose their harshness. Your nights grow longer in peace. Your days are no longer driven by urgency, because you have stepped out of the vibrational field of fear and entered the house of love, where everything that happens contributes to your good, and where you no longer need to control the external because the internal is at peace. And when the internal is at peace, the world rearranges itself. This book was written to be a map, not an intellectual treatise, not another doctrine. A clear, direct, uncomplicated map. Each chapter is a step, each word a lamp. And if you follow it with honesty, Without haste or expectations, you will come out of fear. Yes, it is possible. Even if you've lived in fear your whole life, even if you've inherited generations of trauma, even if your body reacts with anxiety, even if you don't know where to start, the spirit within you already knows and it is guiding you. But you must be willing. You must open yourself. You must want to stop being who you have been, because fear, although it may seem like an enemy, has become an identity. And freeing yourself from fear is not merely dropping a habit, it is letting a self die. The self that fears losing, fears failing, fears not being loved, fears getting sick, fears dying. That self is not your soul. That self is a mistake, and now together we are going to undo it. Not through struggle, but through understanding. Not through force, but through prayer. Not by human will, but by surrender to the truth. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. It doesn't say the truth will protect you from fear. It says it will make you free, because freedom is not a gift from the world. It is a spiritual inheritance, and it is yours right now, if you dare to claim it. To live without fear is to live as the Christ within you, present, clear, free, loved, protected, invulnerable, and if he lives in you as he does, then there is no reason to fear. You only need to remember. This book is that remembrance, that sign on the road, that voice that says, "Do not fear, rise up." The free soul already dwells within you. Living without fear, based on the teachings of Emmet Fox, we've noticed that more than 80% of people who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. Fear is not a protector, it is a jailer. Fear presents itself before your weapon, disguised as prudence. It speaks with a convincing voice, cloaked in logic, dressed in a tone that sounds paternal and authoritative. It whispers, "Don't do it yet, wait a little longer. You're not ready, you could lose everything. You could get hurt. You might fail." And the one who is not vigilant, who has not awakened in spirit, hears this voice and obeys it, believing they are being wise, that they are exercising caution. But what is truly happening is something deeper, more subtle, and far more tragic. They are surrendering their freedom to an inner jailer, because fear does not protect. Fear imprisons. It doesn't prevent danger, it prevents growth. It doesn't stop pain, it blocks experience. It doesn't save you from suffering, it sabotages your transformation. The soul needs no protection, for the soul is invulnerable. It is not the soul that fears, it is the ego. It is the false self, built from separation, convinced that it is alone, that it can be harmed, that it must depend on approval, success, image, and control to survive. The ego needs protection because by its very nature, it is fragile. But the soul lives and expresses itself in complete trust, not because everything will turn out according to the world's expectations, but because it knows that everything contributes to its awakening. When you act out of fear, you are silently saying, "I don't trust life, I don't trust God, I don't trust myself." You might not say it with words, you might not even think it consciously, but that is what fear is. Existential distrust. It is faith in reverse. It is the inner decree that evil is stronger, that you are in danger, that you are not enough, that the world is hostile. Because God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but one of power, love, and self-control. 2 Timothy 1:7. That is the truth. Fear is not natural, it was not placed in you by the Spirit. Fear is learned, and everything learned can be unlearned. Some say to me, but fear helps us be careful, avoid risks, make the right decisions. And I answer, that's not fear, that's wisdom. Wisdom doesn't paralyze, it guides. Wisdom doesn't shrink you, it expands you with order. Wisdom doesn't make you doubt your worth, doesn't make you smaller, doesn't punish you with anxiety. Fear, on the other hand, builds invisible bars around you. Bars that take the shape of, "I can't. That's not for me. What if it goes wrong? It's too late. They'll judge me. I'm not enough. What if it happens again?" And the terrible thing is, over time, you begin to believe those bars are part of you. You get used to living half alive. You get used to dreaming in silence and acting out of caution. You convince yourself that you weren't made for more. And so the fear that entered as a whisper becomes your jailer. But the soul cannot live in a cage. It can adapt for a while, it can tolerate it, but sooner or later, it awakens. And when it awakens, it cannot tolerate the lie any longer. It can no longer bear immobility disguised as safety. It no longer believes the tale of later, someday, or when I'm ready. The free soul rises and says, "Why should I fear if God is with me?" When Jesus spoke to his disciples and to the crowds, he said over and over again, "Do not be afraid." He didn't say it to console, he said it as a spiritual command, because he knew that fear is a vibration that blocks the kingdom. Where fear resides, miracles cannot. Where fear rules, faith cannot act. When Peter wanted to walk on water, he succeeded, so long as his consciousness was aligned. But when he looked at the wind, when he disconnected from presence and focused on the threat, he fell. And Jesus said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. The fall was not because of the sea, it was because of the mind. Likewise, you don't fall because of events, but because of how you interpret them. It's not what happens, it's what you believe about what happens. And if you look through the lens of fear, everything seems threatening. But if you see through the soul, everything becomes part of the path. Fear is the great thief of grace. It steals the decisions you never make. It steals the relationships you never allow. It steals the paths you never walk. It steals the ideas you never express. It steals the joy of being who you are. But it can only do this if you believe it. When you no longer accept its authority, when you stop obeying it. When you decide, even trembling, to act from your soul, fear begins to weaken. It doesn't vanish immediately, but it begins to crack, and you begin to grow stronger. Every step without fear, no matter how small, is an act of liberation. Today I invite you to look at your fears with courage, not to fight them, not to force them away, but to see them in the light, and to speak to them from your soul. Say, "I see you, but I no longer obey you. I recognize you've lived in me as a guardian, but I do not need to be protected from love. I am no longer a spiritual child. I do not need to hide to feel safe. The one who guards me is the Most High. I am free. And today I begin to live as such. Fear will not fall on its own, and it will fall when you rise, and not with violence, with understanding, with faith, with resolve. Fear is not a protector. It is an ancient jailer whom you can now thank for its role, and then open the door and walk away. Your soul does not fear, and you are ready to remember that you were born free. Prayer to disobey fear. Father of all truth, today I acknowledge that fear has been a false teacher. I believed it. I obeyed it. I allowed it to limit me up, but not anymore. Today I align with your love, which is perfect. And perfect love casts out all fear. I declare that I do not need to live on alert or in control or in defense. You are my guide, you are my shield, and I am free. Chapter 2, Anatomy of Fear, how it is born, how it is fed, how it is cut off. No one is born with fear. That is the first great revelation you must accept if you truly wish to step out of its domain. Fear is not an essential part of your being. It is not a natural inheritance of the soul. It is not a divine protection hidden within your reflexes. Fear is an acquired mental habit, a vibration that is injected into consciousness through error, ignorance, and repetition. And like all things acquired, it can be unlearned. But to dissolve fear with power, and not just effort, we must first understand its structure, unmask its mechanisms, and look directly at its anatomy. Because only what is seen can be transformed. Only what is recognized can be surrendered to the light. Fear is born from the thought of separation. The moment the soul, in its passage through this world, identifies with form, with the body, with a story, with the small self, the illusion of being alone arises. And where there is illusory loneliness, imagined vulnerability follows. And where there is vulnerability, fear is born. Fear then is the child of forgetting. It does not come from what happens, but from the unconscious belief that you are separated from God, from the source of all goodness. Because if you knew with certainty that you live within the loving intelligence that upholds galaxies, what could you possibly fear? If you remembered, not in theory but through living experience, that the same force which resurrects, transforms, and creates dwells within you, what harm could ever reach you? Fear is born in thought, but it doesn't stay there. It installs itself in the body, seeps into habits, becomes repeated emotion, a gesture, a language, a way of seeing the world, and it becomes structure. And if not interrupted, if not dissolved at the root, it becomes a way of life. For what is thought again and again, and what is felt again and again, eventually starts to feel like me, but it is not. It is a guest, it's an uninvited tenant, a shadow you can remove, if you choose to look at it clearly. How is fear fed? It feeds on attention. It is nourished by repetition. It is strengthened by words. Each time you describe your fears, and each time you speak of what might go wrong, and each time you act as if the worst is bound to happen, you are feeding fear. And more subtly, it feeds on defense. Each time you try to protect yourself from fear, you reinforce it. because defense begins with the belief that there is something real to defend against. But the spiritual truth is this: when you are aligned with presence, nothing real can harm you. You don't need protection when you live in the center of truth. What you need is awakening. Fear wears many faces. It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it disguises itself as excessive caution, endless analysis, paralyzing doubt, perfectionism, and the need to control, or nameless anxiety. But in all these cases, the root is the same: a mind that does not trust, a consciousness that has forgotten its divine origin. And so it begins to imagine scenarios, to predict misfortunes, to relive past errors, to avoid anything that implies surrender. Fear doesn't seek real safety. It seeks to keep you from changing, and it wants to stop you from evolving, and because fear cannot survive in a soul that is growing. And that is why every step toward your expansion will be met by a final resistance. Fear whispering, "You can't, you shouldn't, now is not the time." And you must recognize that voice and say firmly, "I no longer believe you. I no longer follow you." Cutting fear is not a matter of strength, but of vision. You don't need to fight it as if it were an external enemy. You need to undo the illusion that sustains it. You need to remember the truth and hold on to it, even if the body trembles. Because this is not about never feeling fear again. It's about not letting fear decide for you. It's about acting even with fear, speaking even with fear, living without waiting for fear to disappear completely. Because in conscious action, fear weakens. In true prayer, fear dissolves. In firm faith, fear evaporates. So, how do you cut it off at the root? Fear is dissolved when it is replaced by a higher idea. That's why it's not enough to want to eliminate it. You must plant in its place a higher truth. If you fear losing and sow the certainty that nothing real can be taken from you, if you fear illness, declare that the life of God is your only reality. If you fear rejection, affirm that your worth does not depend on man, but on the Christ that lives within you. If you fear the future, repeat in faith, "My times are in God's hands." Psalm 31:15. Because where truth is sustained, error cannot remain. Prayer is your sword, declaration is your shield, and presence is your victory. You don't need to feel brave. You need to remember that you are invulnerable, not by merit, but because whoever lives in God is protected by divine nature, not by human defense, but by spiritual vibration. And that protection, invisible to the world, it is real, operative, unbreakable. Fear screams to intimidate, but it has no substance, no root in truth, and so it falls. It's when you stop feeding it, when you see it for what it is, a shadow cast by a confused mind, and you are not that mind, you are the light that can illuminate it. So today, brave soul, I invite you to look within, not to identify with fear, but to say, "I know how you were born and I know how I fed you, but now I also know how to cut you off." And in doing so, that you will not only recover your peace, you will recover your power. And when that happens, fear will finally cease to be, the silent tyrant that governed your steps, and will return to what it always was, an illusion that no longer rules your soul. Prayer to dissolve fear at the root. Beloved Father, today I recognize that fear does not belong to me. It was not planted by you. It is not born from my soul. It is a shadow, and today I choose to look at it with your light. I declare that I am united with the truth, and in that truth there is no room for fear. Where I once feared, I now trust. Where I once doubted, I now rest. Where I once ran, I now stand firm. Because if you are with me, who can be against me? Today I cut fear with the sword of love and choose to live free. Amen. Fear does not arise in the soul. The one who fears is the false self. The soul lives in God, and in God there is no fear. This is an eternal, unchanging truth that stands firm, even if the entire world says otherwise. The soul, your true being, your unshakable center, the living spark of God within you, does not know fear because it does not know separation. The soul does not believe it can be harmed, abandoned, judged, or lost, because it knows its existence is sustained by the very source of all goodness. So when you feel fear, it is not your soul that is afraid. It is another part of you, a more superficial, more vulnerable, more confused part. It is the constructed self, the character, the false self. This false self is not a sin, nor a punishment, nor a demon. It is simply a mental creation born of spiritual ignorance. It was shaped by your stories, your wounds, your mistaken beliefs, your defenses. It is the result of having believed again and again that you were alone, that you had to fight, that you were not enough, that love was conditional, that life was dangerous. This false self is fragile because it is based on an illusory identity. It believes it is the body, the name, the story, the reputation. And since everything it believes itself to be can change, it lives in a state of constant alertness. That is the root of fear. The false self is the one that asks, "What if I'm rejected?" because it believes its worth depends on approval. The false self is the one that says, "I have to defend myself," because it believes it is exposed. The false self is the one that freezes, justifies, controls, obsesses over the future. But that is not you. That is only a temporary mental reflection. The real you, the soul, needs no defense because the soul cannot die, cannot be broken, cannot be diminished. The soul is immutable, radiant, eternal. You are the light of the world. Matthew 5:14. When you begin to observe your fears in this light, something shifts. You stop believing that fear is who you are. You begin to notice that there is an observer behind the fear, and that observer does not tremble, does not react, does not hide. That observer is your real self, and your real self is free. This is the key, not to fight fear, but to stop identifying with it. Every time you say, "I am afraid," what you are truly saying is, "My false self is active." And instead of battling that fear, you can take a step inward and say, "This is not my soul. This is a reaction from my conditioned self. I can choose from a higher place." Then the miracle happens, not because fear suddenly vanishes, but because you rise above it. You take the wheel from the awareness of the soul, and since the soul does not fear, fear becomes irrelevant. You can feel it, but it does not rule you. You can notice it, but it does not stop you. That is how you begin to live as who you truly are, not from the fragile self, but from the eternal one. Not from the fearful mind, but from the spirit that knows. The false self seeks to survive. The soul simply seeks to be. The false self measures, compares, accumulates. The soul trusts, surrenders, expands. The false self reacts, the soul chooses. Therefore, to overcome fear, you don't need to become courageous in human terms. You need to step out of the self that fears and return to the soul that remembers. And returning to the soul is not mystical or complicated. It is as simple as pausing, breathing, and repeating, "This feeling is not me. I am the one who observes. I am the one who chooses. I am the one who lives in God." And in God, fear has no reality. This is not a mental trick, it is a vibrational truth. When you practice it, your awareness rises, and from that elevated place, fear cannot reach you. There comes a point on the spiritual path when you no longer speak to fear trying to persuade it. You simply turn your back on it and face the light, the self, the Christ within you, who has never doubted, never feared, never failed. Because if you are the light of the world, as the Master said, how could you fear the darkness, when you are the very one who dispels it? Fear does not dwell in the soul, it only exists in the shadow of the self that believes it is separate. And if today you choose to let go of that identification, the soul will breathe again, and with it you will live again. Prayer to remember who I am. Father of my true self, today I stop confusing myself with the self that fears, the self that doubts, the self that limits. That is not who I am. Today I remember that I am soul, I am light, I am an extension of you. And because you do not fear, I too shall not fear. Bring me back to the center, where peace is not negotiable, where fear holds no reign, and where everything is clear. That is where I wish to dwell. That is where I wish to live. Amen. Chapter 4. Thinking with fear, speaking with fear, living in fear. Fear is not an occasional visitor who comes, bothers you, and then leaves. When it goes unrecognized and unmasked, it becomes atmosphere. It seeps into the most intimate corners of thought. It hides behind the most ordinary decisions. It steals the words you speak without noticing, and ends up creating a way of living that seems like yours. But it isn't. It's a life built on quicksand, on borrowed ideas, on unshakable assumptions that promise protection and only deliver confinement. To think with fear is to live in a state of mental alertness, even when everything outside appears calm. It is to constantly imagine what could go wrong, what's missing, what could be lost. It is to build mental castles with the bricks of insecurity. It is to measure everything by the yardstick of threat. It is to look at the future as if it were a minefield instead of a field of possibilities. It is, unknowingly, to use your intelligence to anticipate disaster. When thought is dominated by fear, it becomes repetitive, obsessive, defensive. It scans the past, looking for signs of danger. It examines the present with suspicion. It projects the future with anxiety. And the most tragic part, it believes that this is wisdom. But that is not the wisdom of the soul. True wisdom does not fear. True wisdom trusts. Fearful thinking is not a sign of preparation. It is a sign of disconnection. Fearful thinking doesn't seek truth. It seeks survival. And the soul didn't come here to survive. It came to shine. To speak with fear is the inevitable extension of thinking with fear, because what fills the heart inevitably flows from the mouth. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Matthew 12:34. And if fear rules within you, your words will become its constant echo. You'll speak of scarcity, danger, illness, mistakes, suspicions, bad news. You'll use phrases that sound normal, but carry deep programming. With my luck, it probably won't happen. This always happens to me. Better safe than sorry. You can't trust anyone. Each of these phrases strengthens the vibrational field of fear, and that field returns to you as experience, because every word is a seed, and the word sown in fear will reap more fear. Speaking with fear can also disguise itself as caution, analysis, or prudence, but at its core, it is a prophecy of lack. You're not describing the world, you're decreeing it. You're not recounting life, you're creating it, one fearful phrase at a time, and if you don't wake up, you'll keep insisting this is just how life is, without realizing you're the one reinforcing it. And inevitably, the moment comes when you're not just thinking and speaking with fear, you are living in fear. That means you organize your day, your relationships, your decisions, your silences, your habits, all from a vibrational base of distrust. You watch what you eat, not for health but out of fear. You choose a partner, not for love, but from need. You accept jobs that don't lift you because you're afraid no better one will come. You guard your money so tightly that it no longer flows. You protect yourself so much that you no longer flow. You no longer live from expansion but from contraction. And the soul, which was made to expand, begins to wither. To live in fear is to live in hiding, even when you're smiling. It is to live constricted, even when you appear busy. It is to live far from yourself, because you're no longer acting from your center, but from a mental figure that only knows how to react. You cannot love fully from fear, you cannot trust, you cannot grow, you cannot truly pray. Because as long as fear is the starting point, everything else becomes a patch, a tense search, a false security that won't last. Without faith it is impossible to please God. Hebrews 11:6. And what is faith? The vibrational opposite of fear. Faith sees the invisible and affirms it. Fear imagines the invisible and dreads it. Both look toward what has not yet happened, but one trusts the promise, the other expects catastrophe. That's why if you truly want to live in freedom, you must change the route of your life. It's not enough to change your occasional thoughts. You must change the inner tone from which you relate to the world, and that is only possible by returning to God as your center, not the punishing God of religion, but the living God who dwells within you. The Christ in you, your true identity, does not fear, and if you align with him, your thoughts become clear, your words are purified, and your entire life begins to radiate trust. This change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through persistence, sincerity, and practice. Every time you notice a fearful thought, don't repress it. Observe it and say, "This does not come from my soul. I'm not this. I choose to trust." Every time you're about to say a fear-laced phrase, pause. Replace it with a blessing. Every time your body reacts with tension, place your hand upon it and repeat, "There is peace here. Presence dwells here. Nothing can harm me." Do it, even if you don't feel it yet. Do it until you do. Do it until your thinking, your speaking, and your living are infused with faith, until fear is no longer the ground beneath you, but merely a passing cloud. Prayer to cleanse my thinking, my speaking, and my living. Father of perfect light, today I offer you my mind, my words, and my entire life. If I have ever thought in fear, spoken in fear, or lived in fear, today I acknowledge it and I let it go. I declare that you are my foundation. I declare that love guides my steps, and I declare that access sustains my path. My thinking shall be blessed. My speaking shall be creation. My living shall be freedom. And where fear once was, now there shall only be light. Amen. Chapter 5. The inheritance of fear, what you absorbed without knowing. Fear doesn't always arrive dressed as trauma. Often it is inherited silently, like an underground current that flows through generations, unquestioned. You didn't choose it. You don't remember when it came in. You don't even know how it started. Yet there it is, operating within your thoughts, influencing your choices, shaping your deepest reactions. Because some fears weren't born in you, but they live in you, until you decide to stop them. And that moment, that sacred instant of awareness, is the beginning of true freedom. Fear is inherited in many ways. It is passed down in the way your parents spoke about money, in how your mother worried about what others would say, in how your father avoided speaking about his emotions, in the silences when someone cried, in the warnings that sounded like wisdom but were actually chains. Don't trust anyone. Don't show your ideas. Make sure first, then dream. Each phrase, each reaction, each omission is recorded in the young mind like an invisible law. And that law is never questioned, because the developing mind believes that anything repeated often enough must be true. You also inherit fear from your culture, your environment, your churches, your schools. You were told that God watches you to punish you, that pleasure is sinful, that your body is a danger, that to doubt is betrayal, that asking questions is disrespect. You were given an image of a distant, stern, demanding God who only comes close if you are good, if you comply, if you obey. And so you learn to fear the most sacred thing, love. You learn to pray from fear, not from communion, to seek God only when something was wrong, to silence your feelings for fear of correction. And with all of this, unintentionally, an inner structure was built where fear seemed sensible. But that fear is not yours. It does not belong to your soul. It is not natural. It is a burden inherited. And like all inherited burdens, it can be seen, understood, thanked, and dissolved. Your soul did not come here to repeat chains. It came to break cycles. It came to say, it ends with me, I am free. But you cannot break what you do not recognize, and that's why today it is necessary to look honestly at the forms of fear you have absorbed without realizing. Are you afraid of others' judgment? Ask yourself, who taught me that my value comes from the outside? Do you fear making mistakes? Where did you learn that error is punishment and not a teacher? Do you struggle to receive? What did you hear about worthiness, about abundance, about enjoying life? Does the idea of being happy without guilt scare you? How many times were you taught that joy is suspicious? The root of your fear may not have started in you, but it can end in you. And that is what sets the soul free, when it chooses to become the breaking point of a system passed down unconsciously. Even Jesus, when speaking to the crowds, denounced the errors of spiritual inheritance. He said, "You nullify the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition." Matthew 15:6. In other words, you have inherited ideas, rules, and ways that were not born of the Spirit, but of habit. And habits, if not examined, suffocate the soul. For the Spirit does not dwell where there is fear. The Spirit is freedom, and you came for this. Not to blame those who passed these fears on to you. They too inherited, they too repeated. They didn't know more, but you do. And in knowing, you become responsible. Today, you can look at your story with new eyes and say, now I understand that this fear is not mine and I don't need it. I will not continue carrying it in the name of loyalty. I honor them, I bless them, and I choose a different path. Unlearning is not betrayal, it is healing. It is honoring your lineage by returning the light it lost. When you heal an inherited fear, you heal both backward and forward. You heal your parents and your children, even if they don't see it, because the invisible is inherited too. And when your vibration changes, everything around you changes. Do not repeat what made you small. Do not defend what distanced you from God. Do not protect a way of living that no longer resonates with your soul. Today you can choose again, not from anger, but from clarity. Not from rejection, but from awareness. Not from struggle, but from the love that sets free. Because when you recognize the fear that was inherited, you stop calling it I, and by doing so, you stop obeying it. And when you stop obeying fear, you begin to serve the Spirit, and that shift, even if you cannot yet see it, changes everything. Prayer to break inherited fears. Beloved God, today I acknowledge that much of the fear I feel was not born in me. It was taught, repeated, passed down, and I unknowingly accepted it. But no more. Today I choose to see with your eyes. I choose to distinguish truth from conditioning. I honor those who raised me, but I will no longer carry their fears. I am free. My soul does not fear. And from today on, I choose to live as one who remembers their divine origin. Amen. Chapter 6. The body as an echo of fear healing from the root. The body is more than a biological structure. It is more than flesh, bone, nerves, and systems. The body is a living instrument of the soul, a precise reflection of your consciousness, a sealed space where the unspoken, the unwept, and the unreleased find their imprint. The body does not merely contain functions, it stores memories. Every emotion that was not processed, every fear that was not embraced, every truth you didn't dare to name, has found in your body a doorway to express itself. Fear, in particular, has a special affinity for residing in the body. It finds silent refuge when the mind refuses to recognize it, when the soul has not yet released it, when you do everything possible not to feel it. But fear does not disappear through ignorance. It transforms through awareness. And if you don't bring it to the light, it will seek to speak to you through the only language you cannot ignore: physical pain, tension, symptoms. I have walked alongside souls who lived with chronic tightness, persistent insomnia, and vague pains that no test could explain. And in every case, when the person humbled themselves and looked within, the body revealed the true root: fear. Fear of the future, fear of not being enough, fear of abandonment, fear of death, fear of life. Fear not as a fleeting emotion, but as a continuous atmosphere. The body is loyal, so loyal that it screams what you silence, not to punish you, but to help you awaken, not to make you suffer, but to push you inward. And if you learn to listen to it with the eyes of the soul, you'll discover that every symptom is a message, a call to heal from the root. Tension in the neck and shoulders, for example, often speaks of the burden of carrying a world that is not yours. Digestive discomfort may signal an inability to process certain emotions or situations. Tightness in the chest often reflects trapped anguish, fear of feeling, fear of losing. Stiffness in the legs, the insecurity of walking through life. These are not fixed rules, but they are recurring signs. And when you begin to see your body as a mirror of your emotional field, then true healing can begin. Not the kind that masks symptoms, but the kind that liberates memory. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit? 1 Corinthians 6:19. If the body is a temple, it must not be treated as an enemy. It must be heard, honored, blessed. That means opening silent spaces where you can ask, what are you trying to show me? What emotion have I denied myself to feel? What fear am I unknowingly storing in my body? Because only when you recognize it can you transform it. The medicine of the soul does not deny the physical, nor does it separate from it. It integrates it and teaches that all true healing is vibrational. The body changes when the vibration that inhabits it changes. And that vibration changes when you dethrone fear. You don't need to fight your body, nor force it, nor curse it. You need to love it deeply, to know that it is on your side, that it wants to help you awaken. Every discomfort, no matter how unpleasant, is a voice saying, here lies something unattended. Here lives a fear still in control. Here cries an emotion begging to be released. And if you respond with presence, with listening, with prayer, the body will respond too. I've witnessed people heal simply by ceasing to fear. No new treatments, no magic formulas, just by releasing internal rigidity, by forgiving themselves, by forgiving others, by finally allowing themselves to cry, by stopping the pretending. Because the body only asks for truth. And when truth enters, fear leaves. Today I invite you to see your body not as an obstacle, but as a companion, to caress the part that hurts and say, thank you for holding me. I'm sorry if I treated you like an enemy. I no longer ask you to bear what is not yours. I release you. I bless you. I hand you over to the love that heals all things. And then in the quiet of your soul, ask yourself, what part of me still believes it needs to be afraid? When did I learn to live in contraction? Am I willing to trust again? Because the fear that lives in the body is not expelled by force. It is released through trust. And trust is born when you remember that God lives in you, and therefore nothing real can harm you. The soul that lives aligned has no need for the body to scream, because it has already learned to listen to the whisper of the Spirit. And when that happens, the body returns to its original state, an instrument of peace. Prayer to release the body from fear. Loving Father, my body has held on to what I did not know how to release. It has carried fears, tensions, memories that did not originate in my soul. Today I recognize this and I choose to heal from the root. I declare that my body is a temple and everything that lives within it now responds to your light. Where there was fear, let love enter. Where there was pain, let peace enter. Where there was struggle, let rest enter. I release, I let go, I bless, and my body responds with gratitude. Amen. Chapter 7. Living without fear is not recklessness, it is alignment with truth. One of the greatest deceptions sown into human consciousness is the belief that living without fear is reckless, dangerous, even irresponsible. That those who do not fear are fools, daredevils, people who ignore consequences or fail to guard themselves against threats. That fear is necessary because it keeps us alert, protects us, and helps us avoid mistakes. Fear has been glorified as though it were a wise guardian, when in truth it is a deep distortion of consciousness. Living without fear does not mean running blindly, nor throwing oneself into the void out of thrill. It does not mean defying life with arrogance or ignoring the risks of human existence. That is not freedom. That is impulsiveness. The free soul is not impulsive, it is clear, centered, and wise. The distinction is essential. The reckless person acts out of reaction, driven by a need to escape control, a desire to prove something. But the one who lives without fear acts from peace, from their center, from an inner certainty that does not seek to impress, does not need justification, and never doubts the goodness of life. Because true freedom is not the absence of limits, it is alignment with truth. The soul that has remembered its origin in God does not need fear to be careful. It is careful out of love, not anxiety. It chooses with discernment, not paranoia. It listens to the inner voice, not the alarm of the lower mind. It knows when to move forward and when to pause, not because it fears loss, but because it has nothing left to prove. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. John 8:32. It does not say the truth will make you reckless or the truth will blind you. It says free. And true freedom carries within it the wisdom of the Spirit, a wisdom not based on statistics or second-hand advice, but on the silent intuition of the aligned soul. Many live under the belief that if they let go of fear, chaos will follow, as if fear were the only brake, as if without it, they would not know how to move, how to protect themselves, how to decide. But what truly happens is that the inner guidance system has atrophied, and then one believes only fear can sustain them. Yet the soul was not created to be sustained by fear. It was created to follow the voice of the Spirit. And that voice does not shout, does not pressure, does not threaten. It speaks calmly, with certainty, with firm tenderness. And when you grow quiet and listen, you know what to do, without needing to be afraid. I have known souls who, upon beginning to free themselves from fear, crossed a threshold of vertigo. They felt as though walking without ground. Calm frightened them. Trusting felt dangerous because they were so used to living tense, watchful, anxious. And when that tension faded, they thought they were being careless. But in truth, they were healing. Healing is learning to live without the whip of fear. It is returning to the original state, where guidance does not come through threat, but through the loving wisdom of the Spirit within you, where you don't react impulsively but respond from a place of clarity, where your decisions don't arise from a fearful what if, but from a grounded, this resonates with my soul. Living without fear does not mean living without challenges. It means no longer seeing challenges as enemies. It means walking with the knowing that goodness walks with you. It means speaking truth, even if your voice trembles, and choosing what is right even when there are no guarantees. That is not recklessness, that is spiritual courage. Recklessness is born of the ego. Freedom is born of the soul. One seeks attention. The other only longs to be authentic. And who is authentic? The one who has stopped fearing what others think, who has let go of the need for approval, who has renounced the rigidity of control. That being lives without fear, not out of unconsciousness, but from clarity. Because they see the world with new eyes. They do not ignore danger, but they do not give it power. They do not deny facts, but they do not hand them their center. And that way of being in the world, that is what brings peace. If today you feel that by letting go of fear you are becoming exposed, remember, you are not becoming exposed. You are becoming open. And openness is the condition for miracles. God does not act in hearts closed by distrust. He moves in the hearts that say, I will no longer be guided by fear. I will be guided by truth. And truth does not make mistakes. You do not need guarantees when you are aligned with it. You need trust. You need presence. You need faith. Faith is not irresponsible. Faith is the highest form of spiritual responsibility. Because the one who lives by faith not only believes in good, they live as a testimony of it. And that, more than any sermon, more than any theory, is what transforms the world. Prayer to live in trust without fear. Beloved God, today I stop confusing fear with wisdom. I stop believing that without fear I will be lost. You are my guide, and where you guide there is wisdom. I declare that my life will not be impulsive, but neither will it be limited. I align with truth, and in truth I walk, without fear, without anxiety, without the need to control. Guided only by the peace that comes from you, and that peace is enough for me. Chapter 8. The method how to dissolve fear through spiritual awareness. Dissolving fear is not a matter of willpower, nor of analysis. Fear is not conquered through human courage, nor dissolved by repeating logical advice. Because fear is not just an isolated thought or a fleeting emotion. It is a vibrational state, a complete way of being in the world, a belief system embedded in a consciousness that has forgotten its oneness with God. That is why any attempt to eliminate fear without transforming consciousness will be superficial. You might calm it for a moment, but it will return. You might understand it, but that doesn't mean you'll stop obeying it. Only when the soul aligns with truth does fear begin to vanish, without a struggle. What I call the method here is not a new technique. It is a natural sequence that arises when the soul remembers its power. It is not based on magical formulas, but on eternal spiritual laws. It is a process that encompasses the mind, emotions, words, and actions. A complete bridge that leads from the darkness of doubt to the certainty of peace. The first step is conscious observation. You cannot dissolve what you do not see. You must stop and face fear directly, without disguising it, without denying it, without running. Look at it in the light of the soul and say, "This feeling is not who I am. What appears here is merely a vibration, learned, inherited, repeated. I observe it, and by observing it truthfully, it already begins to lose power." The second step is mentalism. Every fear is sustained by an idea. Emotion has no existence of its own. It is a reaction to belief, and if that belief is not examined, it governs you. That is why, as you observe your fear, you must ask yourself with conviction, what am I believing here? I believe I can be rejected, abandoned, punished, limited, destroyed. I believe I am alone, powerless, that evil is stronger than good. That idea is the root of fear, and you must recognize that it is false, absolutely false, because you are not separate from God. And if you are not separate, there is no real threat. Everything you fear exists only in the plane of illusion. True mentalism is not repeating positive phrases. It is holding in consciousness the exact idea of truth. It is replacing error with precise affirmations that dissolve it. So if you feel fear of loss, repeat with clarity, "Nothing real can be taken from me. The good God gave me cannot disappear. My provision is guaranteed by spiritual law." If you fear illness, declare, "The spirit of life dwells in me. My body is the expression of divine order. I live in perfect health because God lives in me." If you fear rejection, affirm, "I am eternally loved by the one who created me. Nothing external can diminish my worth. The only approval I need, I already have in God." Each time you repeat a greater truth, fear loses a layer, not because you force it out, but because you illuminate it. The third step is prayer, but not the begging, trembling, anxious kind. True prayer is union. It is remembering, not pleading. It is entering into communion with the source, not trying to persuade it. It is saying from the soul, "Father, I am in you. I move in you. I live in you. And in you, fear does not exist. That is why I release it and surrender to your peace." Sincere prayer reorganizes your energetic field. It makes you receptive to goodness, dissolves tension, and brings eternal love into the present moment. The fourth step is decree. The word is creation. And after you've seen fear, recognized its root, and lifted your vibration through prayer, it is time to speak with authority. It is not enough to think differently. You must declare aloud your new state, because the word is seed, sword, and key. Do not decree what you see, decree what you choose to see. Say, "I am free, I am guided, I am whole, I am a channel of love, and I am invulnerable in God." Repeat, proclaim, declare, not as one trying to convince oneself, but as one who remembers. The word spoken with faith accelerates transformation, not because it convinces an external God, but because it resonates with the inner law. And the fifth step, the one that completes the bridge, is action. It is not enough to think, pray, and decree. You must act from the new consciousness. The soul grows stronger when it walks its truth. Take the step, even if you tremble. Respond with love, even if the old self cries out for defense. Speak from peace, even if the old mind urges caution. Every action without fear sends a message to the universe. I no longer obey the old system. I am free. And this coherence between thought, prayer, word, and action is the most powerful force in the world. It transforms the very structure of your being. It lifts you out of the vibrational field of fear and installs you in the field of the kingdom where all things are possible. This is the method, clear, simple, livable. 1. I observe. 2. I recognize the false belief. 3. I replace it with truth. 4. I pray from union. 5. I decree with faith. 6. I act as a free soul. Do it every day and do it with humility and do it with perseverance. And I promise, because I have seen it, fear will vanish. Not through avoidance, but through presence. Not through force, but through alignment. Because a soul that unites with the truth no longer needs to defend itself from fear, for it no longer believes in fear's authority. And that, dear soul, is true freedom. Prayer to live the method. Perfect Father of love, today, I choose to look at my fears, not to hide, but to release them. I recognize them as errors. I dissolve them in your truth. I declare that I am guided, protected, and sustained. My soul is free. My word is powerful. My action is aligned with the light. And where once there was fear, now there is only certainty. Thank you, for I already am what I've always been in you. Amen. Chapter 9. Powerful declarations to evict fear from the soul. Words are seeds. There is no prayer that does not sprout. There is no phrase spoken with faith that does not set in motion the invisible currents of life. From the beginning of time, it has been this way, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Genesis 1. Because the word is creative. And when the soul remembers this mystery, when it embraces it with reverence, when it uses it with clarity, it begins to build its world from the invisible to the visible, from the eternal to the circumstantial, from truth to fact. Fear cannot dwell where the anointed word reigns, because every time you declare a spiritual truth with certainty, you are not simply speaking, you are evacuating error. You are evicting from the soul those dark mental forms that had settled without permission, that spoke in your mind as if they were yours, that made you believe you were small, vulnerable, forgotten. When you rise up and speak with inner authority, fear, like a thief caught, flees. Not because you are humanly strong, but because your voice has united with God's. I'm not talking about repeating empty words. I'm not talking about automatic formulas or memorized phrases without presence. I'm talking about declaring consciously, becoming a living channel of the word with a capital W, using your verb not as an echo of fear, but as an instrument of divine creation. When fear reaches you, whether as a thought, an emotion, a symptom, or a circumstance, do not remain silent, do not retreat, do not explain it away. Stop, breathe, close your eyes if you can, and from the very center of your soul declare the truth. You don't need to shout. You don't need to convince anyone. Just be truthful and say, I am free and I am guided. I am loved. I'm invulnerable in God, and nothing real can harm me. No good can be lost. Love surrounds me. Wisdom directs me. Goodness goes before me. When you say this, don't say it to calm yourself. Say it as one who awakens. Say it as one who affirms what already is. Say it as one who remembers. Fear takes root because you tolerate it. It dissolves when you say you do not command here. And that authority is not aggressive. It is spiritual, gentle, and firm. It is light, and light does not fight darkness, it simply replaces it. At the start of your day, when leaving the house, making a decision, facing a conflict, feeling a symptom, or looking to the future, declare, do not repeat what everyone says. Do not describe what you fear. Do not recount what hurts with delight. Speak as one aligned, and as one who no longer speaks from the lower self, as one who remembers the kingdom. Then your word will be fire, it will be medicine, it will be a shield. Your voice can open invisible paths. Your voice can seal your field. Your voice can restore your body. Your voice, when united with the Christ within you, creates. I have seen lives change without changing circumstances, simply because someone changed their declaration. They stopped saying, I am always afraid, and began saying, the love of God sustains me. They stopped saying, this won't turn out well, and began saying, all things work together for my good. They stopped saying, I don't know what to do, and began declaring, divine wisdom guides me now. And the world around began to respond because what you declare from truth becomes law for your experience, not because it's magic, but because you act in the name of principle. And the principle never fails, the principle responds. I believed, therefore I spoke. 2 Corinthians 4:13. That is the law. You speak what you believe and end up seeing what you spoke. So, if you want to see peace, declare peace. If you want to see health, declare health. If you want to see openness, declare openness. Don't wait until you feel strong. Speak as one who is already standing. Even if the body trembles, even if the mind doubts, even if the world says otherwise, declare anyway. And day by day, word by word, you will evict fear from every corner of your consciousness. Not by struggle, but by truth. Because it's not about having no fear, it's about no longer obeying it. And that is achieved when the soul chooses to speak from the light. Prayer to anoint my word. Eternal Father, today I consecrate my voice to you. I no longer want to repeat the decrees of fear. I no longer want to echo error. I want to speak from truth. I want every word I utter to be born in faith, bathed in peace, and create only good. I declare that my word is sacred and that I will use it to evict fear and affirm your living presence within me. My word is creation, and today I create a new world without fear, without guilt, only in love. Amen. Chapter 10. The opposite of fear is not courage, it is love. For centuries we've been told that to overcome fear, we must be brave, that the opposite of fear is courage, that when fear strikes, you must grit your teeth, gather strength, puff yourself up, and jump anyway, even if you're trembling inside. That's the popular teaching, and while it may sometimes seem to work, it doesn't transform what's underneath. Because courage understood as human effort is merely a reaction, a way to impose yourself on fear, not to dissolve it. Courage can help you cross a door, but fear still lives in the house. It can help you do what you feared, but it doesn't free you from the pattern that causes it. What removes fear at its root is not an attitude, it is a presence, and that presence is none other than love. Fear is not conquered, it dissolves in love. Just as night does not fight the light but disappears the moment the light is turned on, so fear evaporates when the soul enters into communion with real love. Not emotional love, not human affection that changes with the weather, not attachment disguised as care. I speak of love with a capital L, love that never runs out, that does not negotiate, that needs no defense, the love that is the very substance of God, the love that asks for nothing and gives everything, the love that sees the invisible and calls forth the eternal, the love that fears nothing because it is the source of all security. When you feel fear, it's because in that moment you've lost contact with that source. You haven't really lost it because God cannot leave you, but you have stopped remembering it. You have turned off the light of consciousness, and so the room fills with shadows. Those shadows are called anxiety, panic, doubt, need to control, obsession with avoiding mistakes. And then everything inside you contracts. You believe yourself at the mercy of the world, you identify with fragility, the body reacts, the mind spins, the heart closes, and before you know it, you live as if you were alone. But you are not alone, you never were and you never will be. That is the foundation of love. Love does not demand perfection from you, does not ask for proof, does not withdraw its presence if you fail. God's love is unconditional, unbreakable, absolute, and is with you right now, even if you don't feel it. It is closer than your breath. It beats in your chest, sees through your eyes, waiting for you to say, "Come." And the moment you do, the moment you stop the whirlwind of fear to return to the center, everything changes. You don't need the problem solved, you don't need guarantees, you only need to enter the presence. And once there is no room for fear. Not because you've become strong, but because love has filled the space. Where love fills, fear cannot enter. In love there is no fear, for perfect love drives out fear. 1 John 4:18. This is not a poetic verse, it is a spiritual law, a declaration of how things work. It doesn't say courage drives out fear, nor strength drives out fear, nor control drives out fear. It says love. Because fear is an illusion, a fog that seems dense but cannot withstand a single breeze of light. And love is that breeze, that clarity. It is the certainty that cannot be questioned. When you are in love, you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to predict. You don't need others' approval. You don't need to have all the visible resources. You only know you are held, and that is enough. That state of knowing without thinking, of trusting without evidence, of walking without fear, that is the greatest freedom a soul can experience in this world. It's not about avoiding pain or shirking responsibility or pretending nothing is wrong. On the contrary, it's about living everything so deeply that you no longer react from fear, but respond from truth. Because love does not take you out of the world. It teaches you to avoid it without losing your peace. Fear makes everything personal. Love expands you. Fear reduces you to your story. Love connects you to your eternity. Fear seeks defense. Love rests, and that deep, vibrant, absolute rest is the most powerful medicine there is. So every time you feel fear, don't tell yourself, I must be strong. Don't fight, don't tense up, don't force yourself. Just pause, close your eyes, breathe and say, Father, remind me of your love. I want to feel it now, and I don't want to keep living as if I were alone. Dwell in me, be in me, love in me, and wait. Let love like an invisible river cleanse the corners of my soul. I need nothing more than this, because when love comes in, fear goes out. Not with noise, not with struggle, not with effort. It simply has no place anymore. Prayer to remember the love that dissolves fear. My Father, I no longer want to fight fear. I don't want to fake courage. I don't want to act from effort. I just want to love you and be loved. I just want to return to you, where there is no doubt, no threat, or where everything is clear. Pour out your perfect love on me, the love that drives out fear, the love that surrounds me, sustains me, restores me, and that when it enters reminds me that I was never alone, that I have always been light, that I am free. Chapter 11. People, places, and situations that trigger your fear. Bless and disarm. Fear does not live in things, it does not dwell in people, it is not embodied in places. Fear is within you, or more precisely, in your perception. But that perception, shaped by years of experiences, memories, and conditioning, has created triggers, silent sparks that suddenly ignite the old system of fear. Sometimes a glance, a word, a tone of voice, a particular street, a name that resurfaces, or a repeated everyday scene is enough, and without knowing why, your body tightens, your mind fills with noise, your heart contracts. Then you believe the danger is outside when in reality you are reliving an unresolved vibration. The soul does not react, the soul responds. But when fear has not yet been dissolved, those reactions appear, reactions you don't understand, that seem disproportionate, that seize you for seconds, minutes, or even days. Most often, the common response is to avoid whatever triggers the fear, to distance yourself from that person, never pass through that place again, resist living that situation. But avoidance does not free you. It only postpones, because what you do not heal today will return in another form. That is why identifying your triggers is not enough. You must turn them into points of evolution, not through force, not through analysis, not with resignation, but with active blessing. Blessing is not a passive act. It is not saying, let God's will be done, and then releasing your awareness. Blessing is reprogramming your vibration. It is taking what triggers you and telling it with spiritual authority, you no longer govern my field, you no longer define me, you are no longer a threat. I bless you, and by blessing you, I disarm you. When you bless a person who has been a trigger for your fear, you are not approving their behavior nor justifying their role. You are interrupting the charge left between you. You are releasing the energy still vibrating in your field. You are saying, I no longer want to react from pain. I want to act from freedom. And by doing so, that person no longer has power over you. Not because they have changed, but because you have. The same applies to places that evoke fear, places where you suffered, where you were rejected, where something marked your body and soul. Those places hold no power over you, but they awaken memories. When you walk through them with fear, what you are saying is, there is still shadow here. But if one day you pass through silently, place your awareness there and say internally, I bless this place. I am not the same as the one who was wounded. I'm different, I'm light. And this street, this house, this room, this hospital no longer hold dominion over me. Then the past begins to release you because blessing heals invisible marks. The same goes for situations, those scenes that repeat like cycles, the interview that makes you tremble, the conversation that paralyzes you, the mistake you don't want to repeat. If every time you approach them you do so alert, defensive, distrustful, fear will continue to rule. But if one day before living that scene you breathe and say, I bless this situation. It doesn't need to be perfect. I need to be present. I am with God, and if He is with me, nothing threatens me. Then fear loses its grip, because this is not about erasing the past. It is about filling the present with so much light that what once activated shadow no longer has anything to hold on to. That light comes when you forgive, not a mental forgiveness, but an energetic one. When you say, I release the burden, I release the scene, I release the role I was forced to play, and then bless, and by blessing, cleanse. And by cleansing, you recover your energy. No trigger can withstand constant blessing, because a trigger only exists as long as you believe it still has power. The power is not in the person, nor in the place, nor in the scene. The power is in you, and when you claim it, you regain peace. This is your work now. Observe without judgment, forgive without effort, bless without stopping, not because you are strong, but because you are grounded in truth. And truth does not fear the past, does not fear memory, does not fear emotion. Truth only sees, cleanses, transforms, and you are the bearer of that truth. Today you can bless what you once feared, and by doing so you become free. Prayer to transform triggers into blessing. My Father, you know which people, which places, which scenes still activate my fear. You know every corner of my soul. So today, I surrender to you what still hurts, what still contracts me, what still dominates me. I bless those who hurt me. I bless where I suffered. I bless what makes me tremble and declare that I am no longer there. I am with you, and with you, the past loses its power. I am free, and what I bless stops hurting me. Amen. Chapter 12. The free soul acts without tension, decides without guilt, and lives without anxiety. You don't need anyone to tell you if you have overcome fear. Your own life shows it. Freedom is not proclaimed with words. It is revealed in the way you walk through the world, in the invisible charity of your breath, in the serene way you choose, in the peace that remains, even when nothing seems under control. The soul that has stepped out of fear's vibrational field is not recognized by appearance, but by its inner state. It makes no noise. It does not impose itself. It does not need to prove anything. Yet where it is, a different atmosphere is felt. There is lightness, clarity, a firm softness that dissolves conflict. The free soul does not need certainty to act because it does not act from defense. It acts from presence. It does not seek guarantees, nor does it applaud impulsiveness. The free soul moves when its inner being indicates, not when the world demands. Its action is not born from what it should do, from what others might say, or from what if. It is not to avoid punishment or seek rewards. Its action comes from a deep understanding that every movement, if aligned with truth, carries its own blessing. That is why it acts without tension. It does not fight fear, but has replaced it with trust. It does not obey rush, but the sacred rhythm within. And most visibly, it decides without guilt. This is perhaps the clearest sign that fear has lost its authority over you. While fear rules, every decision is accompanied by a whisper of doubt. Am I doing this right? What if I'm wrong? What if I hurt someone unintentionally? What if I'm not enough? But when the soul is free, guilt vanishes like fog before the sun, not because the person becomes irresponsible or selfish, but because they remember they don't have to carry the whole world on every step they take. They understand their worth does not depend on outcomes, that the path is made by walking, that perfection is not a condition to love or choose. The free soul knows error is not condemnation, but a teacher. It knows it does not need to justify itself. It knows there is a higher intelligence, a spirit acting with and through it, even when it doesn't understand everything. And so it decides, not harshly but with certainty, and lives without anxiety. This is perhaps the most silent and powerful sign. Anxiety is the symptom of a mind wanting to control the uncontrollable. It is the physical expression of a forgotten soul, the small self feeling alone, exposed and directionless. But the free soul does not need to control because it trusts, because it remembers that what must come will come, that what must leave will leave, and that what is not yet understood will be revealed in due time. That is why the free soul does not rush, does not obsessively watch, does not check 100 times what it already knows. It does not live trapped between yesterday and tomorrow. It inhabits the now as a sacred altar, and in this now it feels whole, complete, sufficient. And if a problem comes, it faces it. If pain arrives, it embraces it, but it does not spiral into fear. It does not identify with the story. It does not relive all its failures to judge itself again. Anxiety no longer finds ground to take root, because the soul, having returned home, no longer needs to anticipate anything. How will you know this in your own life? You will know when you can look at the clock without feeling pressure, when you can make a decision without reviewing it 1,000 times afterward, when you can hear your name without startle, when you can go through a day without imagining catastrophic scenarios, when you can look at others without feeling threatened, compared, or judged, when you can lie down without that feeling of debt that you weren't enough, when you can pray without urgency just for the joy of communion. It doesn't need everything to be perfect. It doesn't require feeling no fear at all. What matters is that you no longer live from fear, that you no longer make decisions from the wound, that you no longer build your identity around defense. You must listen to yourself, observe yourself, love yourself, and declare, "This feeling does not control me. These thoughts do not define me. I am no longer there." The free soul is not the one that never falls, but the one that no longer punishes itself when it falls. The free soul is not the one that can do everything, but the one that no longer needs to prove it can. The free soul is not the one that shines the brightest, but the one that shines without fear. And you can be that soul, not in a year, not when everything is perfect, but today, with who you are, with what you have, with your memories, your doubts, your old fears, because none of that limits your freedom if you are willing to remember who you are. God did not make you to live in fear. He made you free. And every day you choose to act without tension, decide without guilt, and live without anxiety, you honor that freedom, not out of pride, but out of faithfulness to the love that created you. Prayer to embody inner freedom. Eternal Father, my soul was made free, but for a long time I have lived under the rule of fear, guilt, and urgency. Today I recognize it, and today I release it. I declare I no longer need tension to act, nor guilt to decide, nor anxiety to live. I declare your peace guides me, your love surrounds me, your truth sustains me. I am free, and from this day forward, I will walk as one who has left the field of fear and entered the kingdom of trust. Chapter 13. Your life as a testimony. Freedom without words. When the soul has crossed through fear, when it has left behind the invisible cage of the small self, when it no longer acts from defense or decides from anxiety, something subtle yet immense begins to happen. It no longer needs to speak to teach. It no longer seeks to convince, correct, save, or explain, not because it has lost love, but because it has become a channel of love itself. And that love does not argue, does not impose, does not raise its voice. It radiates. True freedom does not alarm, does not demand applause, does not insist on attention. It manifests as a silent presence that soothes without words, that commands without force, that heals without touch. It is the very vibration of the soul aligned with God. It is a testimony that does not come from arguments, but from energy, coherence, inner peace, a peace that does not depend on circumstances and is therefore irresistible. I have often seen someone enter a room and change the atmosphere without saying a single word. No one knows why, but the air feels different. There is clarity. There is kindness, a sense of relief, as if their mere presence had opened an invisible window. That is the free soul, a presence that liberates. And it's not because that soul never felt fear, but precisely because it has known it, crossed through it, forgiven it. It's not that this soul never fell, but that it chose to rise without anger. It decided not to respond with the old wounded self's reaction. It took its story, its wounds, its trials, and made from them fertile ground where love blooms, and that can be felt. You don't need to preach to your family. You don't need to correct those still living in fear. You don't need to convince anyone of your awakening. You only need to live as a free soul, and the world will see, the world will feel it. And without knowing why, someone will approach you and say, "With you, everything seems easier." And you will know it was not your wisdom, nor your advice, nor your phrases. It was your being. It was the truth within you, working silently. The free soul does not seek to convince because it has nothing left to prove. It doesn't need to be right. It doesn't need to save, doesn't need to intervene in everything, because it knows every soul has its own rhythm, every consciousness its own dawn. And so it loves without tension, waits without anxiety, supports without manipulation. And when someone asks, it answers. When someone seeks, it offers. But not from urgency, from serenity, from the certainty that the only thing that truly transforms is love embodied. And that love no longer needs to shout, because its mere presence reveals what is possible. Because the free soul, wherever it goes, leaves a trail of peace, not because it tries, but because it has already become that peace. And this is the highest teaching, to live in such a way that fear feels uncomfortable beside you, that complaint falls silent in your presence, that judgment dissolves in your gaze, not because you say something, but because you have remembered who you are, and that memory is contagious. The sleeping soul sees your calm and something stirs inside, not out of envy, but longing. Something inside says, "I want to live like that too." And then, without saying a word, you have become a testimony. You have planted a light. You have opened a possibility, and that, more than any speech, any book, any lesson is the greatest blessing, because the soul that has conquered its fear does not do it just for itself. It does it for all humanity, and it does it so others can see it is possible. It does it to be a mirror of the truth. You don't need to change the world, you only need to embody the love the world has forgotten. Wherever you are, wherever you speak, wherever you walk, freedom will work, not through effort, but through radiance, not through persuasion, but through vibration, not by human wisdom, but by divine presence. And so, without speeches, without urgency, without the need to explain, your life will be a living prayer, a burning lamp, a gospel without words, prayer to be a presence of freedom. Beloved Father, I no longer want to convince, no longer want to impose, no longer want to speak of you without first living you. Make me a silent testimony, a flame that does not fade, a presence that frees. Let my life speak louder than my lips. Let my walk reveal your peace. Let my gaze awaken memories of love. Make me a channel, make me a mirror, make me light. And wherever I am, may others remember that they too are free. Amen.